Thank you for joining us today at the very first Brooklyn Fine Art Print Fair. We're in Powerhouse Arts, which is an incredible place with an incredible team. We couldn't have done all of this without serious help from every corner of the building. So thanks to all the staff that are in here and everybody else. It's been amazing to work with you all. My name is Ann Schaefer. I'm from Fine Arts Baltimore, and I helped Luther & Co. put this all together, and what you see upstairs and all of these talks and everything is the work of all of us. I'm excited to introduce our first talk of the weekend. We have a conversation with two outstanding artists seated over here to my left. This is Rob Swainston and Zorawar Sidhu. And to my right is Lane Sell. They're going to be in dialogue. Lane agreed to interview them and try and keep them on track. Okay. Rob and Zorawar have been collaborating for, I don't know how many years? That many? Okay. And they make incredible work, some of which is in this very hall on either side of you. And I hope you had a chance to take a look at them. This is from a series from 2022 called Doom Scrolling that is worth really investigating. Plus, they brought over 2 wood blocks from which they printed, not these, I don't think, but other ones. And you're welcome to touch them to get a feel for really what happens when you use a router, right? A CNC router to carve all that stuff, all that text, which is crazy. Okay. We're thrilled to have them here. Lane is going to keep them on track, as I said. He has expertise in collaborative printmaking, and he also owns Shoestring Press, which has a booth upstairs, number C6. C6, so go see him. In addition, I need to tell you that Rob and Zorawar have a show of recent work up at the Petzel Gallery in Chelsea. It is open until 8 o'clock tonight, so you'll have time to go see their amazing new work, some of which is even bigger than this. And the show itself closes on April 12th, so you still have time. Let's see. They're going to talk for 45 minutes, and at the end, we're going to leave a little room for a Q&A, I think. I think Jackie's going to handle that part. And without further ado, please help me welcome Zorawar, Rob, and Lane.
This thing is important. Okay.
Does it work? Yes.
Yep.
Thanks, Ann.
Yeah, we did it.
All right. Yeah. Great.
And thanks, Powerhouse.
So we're gonna just to do a little bit of table setting. We're gonna talk about mostly the work in this show that's up at Petzel now, which is called Flashpoint, and there are kind of 3 distinct but related bodies of work in this show. There's these really large woodblock prints, which are sort of as a series called History is Present. There's a more intimate group of multicolor etchings, which is somewhere in here. Nope. Well, you're going to get a good preview.
You have to go see them.
Yeah. And
There they are.
Yeah, there they are on the right.
They're so intimate that you can't even see them.
Yeah, so that's so intimate you can't see them. And these sort of mid-scale combination woodblock and silkscreen prints, they're sort of about the same scale as the doom scrolling prints in here, called War for the Union, just so that we can maybe keep straight what we're talking about. But to go back to the beginning, there we go. So these the woodcuts in History is Present it's hard to talk about them without maybe starting by talking about just how big they are. They have this scale, and they also have a lot of visual reference to Romantic painting, and also to things like the famous blue marble photograph from Apollo 17 or the Earthrise from Apollo 8. The Romantics you guys have talked about were sort of, they were dealing with kind of essentially the start of the Anthropocene, which we're living through, possibly the end of, hopefully not the end of yet. The moment when we can sort of first distinguish man as deeply changing nature and the terror of the encounter with both the sublime but also the fragility of nature as well as its power. There's also the sort of moment that more recently where we started to be able to envision the world as a sort of single unit, the view of Earth from space. And I think the history as present prints are kind of depicting a third moment. You guys have talked about it as a speculative future of massive floods and inescapable conflagrations and desperate mitigation efforts. Can you talk about the decision to make this work at such a technically and optically challenging scale? Let me look at some of them here.
All right. Well, one of the things that you see in romantic painting is that nature is bigger than people. In the Caspar David Friedrich show at the Met right now, even though the paintings aren't that big and the people are tiny, the scale of the issue is bigger than a human scale. Here we can do it both ways, have small figures, but also make the prints themselves bigger than you. Also, the format of the 4x8 sheet of plywood kind of calls for something that's of that size.
Yeah, like use the word the sublime, which is, one of those aesthetic words, art criticism. I think when it was originally formulated, it was a category of knowledge that was like, you don't understand it. It was Kant made a box called the sublime, aesthetic knowledge, which was like, it's bigger than you, you don't understand it, it's terrible. And I think we're in a moment right now, climate-wise, politically, socially, in which we are at a moment where the events are happening, feel bigger than us, and they're overwhelming. I would also add to that, too, that we're trying to do some scale shifts with the work to put people in front of it so it takes over everything. It's a different scale than looking at your telephone or at your computer, you just consume it differently. It's a different kind of seeing when you make it at that scale. And it's at the size of romantic landscapes, which were designed to be very large and to take on history painting, which I think it replaced history painting probably, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. We could talk more about scale if you want to. I mean, it is the size of plywood. It's a technical thing.
Right.
We built a press, I don't want to go too far down that road, that could handle it at this scale. One of the things that one of the fun things about collaborating is, can we do it like that? And we can sort of plan it. And that's one thing in printmaking that you can do, is you can build a machine and that process, and you make all the apparatus to do it, and then you can have that thing. But I mean, the history of present starts as with the idea of the Anthropocene, like you were saying, with the notion of climate change, and there's social aspects to it. It's just not all environmental, and just are confronting it and what we can do as people. We respond in our own ways to it. Certain other people have different technical skills that I hope they're addressing the problems. Like, we're artists. We're trying to address it visually. We're trying to talk about, I think, am I babbling? I just drank 4 espressos. I mean, we're trying to talk about something that I don't know if we can articulate yet. I think we can't verbalize it yet. Like, Bifo talks about like extinction thinking, like has made a space for us to be able to think about like an end that we've never thought about before. So, and we can't articulate it yet in language. And I think art has often been a category of knowledge and a category of knowing, in which like you can begin to talk about something, you can express it visually. We don't quite know how to articulate it, but now once we can visualize it, then we can start to talk about it. If that makes sense. You got it?
Okay.
Cool. There's actually a lot of the prints that are up here also really have great use of this mark, but one of the sort of hallmarks of these prints is these wood engraving marks that are kind of run all through them. They're these blown up versions of the kind of sinuous contour lines of the historic technique. into a texture that you guys have made big enough so they can be processed through a CNC router on this also very highly textured kind of form plywood. And it was observed to me that maybe this is kind of the mark of money, which is where we sort of see that line more often. And as I was talking to Zorawar about this a couple weeks ago, you sort of sent me in the direction of thinking about dictionary illustration and scientific information as sort of where, for you, that mark kind of comes from in a historic way. And so the wood engraving mark shows something about a kind of contemplative time and the movement from speculation about the exotic. If you think about Durer's rhinoceros is really a way of using that mark to speculate about something that you haven't seen yet, to becoming kind of certain information if you think about an anatomy textbook or a dictionary entry that might have an illustration. Can you guys talk a little bit about your sense of time and authority, and maybe also the sort of move to global scale that is happening in the magnification of this kind of mark?
All right, a little bit about authority. Classicism in the time of Poussin, if you were to, rather than paint a horse, you'd look at the horse in the Parthenon frieze. You look at an engraving of that horse. That horse is the best horse, better than a real horse. It's been filtered through time to kind of gain a art historical gravitas. The engraving for this one was based on a Turner landscape, the Fighting Temeraire, where an older ship is being tugged by a modern steamship that's spewing black smoke into the sky. And it's, there's an additional layer of meaning there. On the smaller 3x4 foot prints we call War for the Union, the choice to use Civil War era engravings to depict these clashing figures gives it that extra layer of meaning. And then there's the time.
They bring it back to it. I mean, I think it's important to, I mean, today we look at everything through this really sophisticated lens of the camera. And the time scale of the engraving is an older way of thinking about history and a previous way that we saw things and a previous way that we knew things. By putting engravings from historical references onto like present day images or combining them together, it's not like you're conflating the present and the past and saying the past repeats itself. What we're trying to do with it is probably to slow down the time, the speed with which we read in the present, and the slow down. When you really start to look at these, there's a speed that you look at them, and you'll see the ones on the wall too from the doom scrolling. You'll see something and you'll start to recognize it, but the more you look, the more you see, the more will come out of it. So the time takes something historical and brings it in the present, but also slows down the way that you see it, because it unfolds over time, I think, a little bit. I mean, I will add to that a little bit, if that makes sense. You're talking a little bit about speculation, speculative futures. Speculation has got a lot of traction right now in academics with the post-human critical theory writers. We need to have a speculation, like to be a little more specific. Like Dana Haraway, if you guys have read her recent book, it was 2017, I think, Staying with the Trouble, where she talks about the need for a speculative future, a near future, in which we can actually work out our present problems and we can sort of see. So a speculative future that includes something historic and includes a new way of looking, but provides us a way out of this kind of what feels like a trap that we're in a cycle that we can't break out of.
Also, just throwing in from a technical standpoint, using these engravings, they follow the logic of CNC milling. They're easily vectorizable because they already have that logic of the software. You know, a drawn lithographic illustration might convey information, but you can't vectorize that. Photography, it doesn't really fit into the way we're working.
It's one of the bases of our collaboration. Sometimes it's called post-digital printmaking. We're revisiting an older technology, woodcut, through the new possibility of a CNC or a laser cutter or the Adobe, the imaging platforms, RhinoCAD, Illustrator, Photoshop, and it's just the possibilities for some older technology with the new technology. We don't have to just throw it all away and embrace some, crazy techno future. There is something in the previous media that we can learn something about contemporary media. It's also like a weird halftone, right? I don't want to go too far in the print geek direction, but we are at a print fair. It's a human.
I think you can go there if you want to with this group.
Oh yeah, it gives you a halftone, and it's a human decision.
It's a human decision.
It's not just that line. It's not a Photoshop line filter, which is more photographically accurate, but it's totally dead. It doesn't have the warmth of someone actually interpreting something.
Someone carving it. I mean, so, if you go back to earlier prints that are just black and white, one of the big issues with printmaking is like to try to figure out how to get continuous tone or how to get grayscales out of a technology that's essentially black and white. Engravers were doing it optically, but they were made by hand. Today we have, we rely on bitmaps and stochastic dots and dither patterns and stuff like that. And they're very mechanical. So in order to break our reliance on the machine, I don't want to sound like the Terminator here, but in order to do that, revisiting the human decisions that were made historically and appropriating them and putting them together with contemporary images is another way for us to sort of take an old media, put it in a new media and really kind of try to slow it down and to give some art historical references and to give layers of meaning that other people, some people will see it who know the art history behind it and some people won't, but it's okay because it works on multiple levels.
And I think that's also like a good segue into what I think is our print geek question, really. But so, Prince of Darkness, which is the shop that you guys sort of run together, share, combined enterprise, is kind of a machine now that has been built around being able to make these complex, multi-layer, hyperscale woodcuts. So it's a milling facility that is adapted to cutting massive blocks on a digital router. It's a lab that is used to explore complex color layering. It's the home of a transfer press that was specially built to print these huge blocks in tightly registered mosaics. It's also a bit of a factory where our workforce of young and really skilled printers are given a lot of responsibility and considerable autonomy to work on what is really the absolute edge of contemporary printmaking. Can you guys talk a little bit about sort of the construction of this version of this machine and how the process of going sort of from doom scrolling and the work that's in the room here to this new work at Petzel, how that has sort of changed the workshop and the workshop process for you guys?
Well, a big print needs a big press, needs a big table, needs big drying racks, needs big paper. I think all of that we had to figure out at once because you need all of those ingredients. It needs big space, it needs big walls.
It needs people too.
It needs more people, yeah.
An assemblage is not just the machine, it's the classic assemblages of the Stelusian, but of the war machine, the person on a horse with the sword, and the human technology of the nomad that makes all that possible. So it includes, you're right, the students that, I teach at Purchase College, and we'll hire students after they graduate. After you graduate, we'll hire you for a job. But, and we have built a print shop that can work at this scale, and that we can realize projects at this scale. Where printmaking is often about building systems. And then, once you build a system, then you can put the inputs in it. You can, and we've built it, like Prince of Darkness originally started as me in my house in South Williamsburg, and it moved. And then Zorawar and I started to work together, and this is like the third iteration of Prince of Darkness, where we've become joined enough that like now Zorawar is in Prince of Darkness too. So it's a shared space, and it's fun to tinker, right? Sometimes the machine doesn't work though, and it's not really that fun. But you know, the challenge of keeping a CNC going and using sign making software to adapt it to woodblock printing is an interesting dilemma. Figuring out how to break something up into color layers that aren't a normal way to break things up into color layers, like a non-CMYK process. It's a technical challenge, and it's interesting. And we can poke at that stuff collectively, and it's also something that's like, it's something that we can do collectively too, because it's like, the thing that we're making is over here, and we can talk about how to make it, and then we can slowly make it. It's a different kind of thinking that's like a collaborative thinking. A print shop is collaborative in its essence historically. There's always been like a quote-unquote master printer, or the guy who's in charge of type, the guy who's in charge of burning pitch in the back alley to get tar for the ink, the guy in charge of beating the paper pulp, the guy it's been the building of a machine that's like, you call it a machine, I'll call it an assemblage, is in the medium, and it's historically in the medium, and it's one of the most interesting things about it, I think, and that's actually the way forward too. Like, we live in a moment where people just want to take stances, and they don't want to talk to each other anymore. And I have a position, and then that's my position. By collaborating and by having people working together is the only way forward, as far as I can see. And I think artists probably should model that behavior a little bit. That's putting a little high horse on it, though. I don't know. Sure, why not? I don't know if we answered the question.
Well, about your question about how it came from doom scrolling, the machine is flexible, revisable. So, we had to revise the machine after making prints of that size, and we did have to figure out how to do that. There was a clue there about color separation.
Yeah, and we learned,
so on.
and we learned, and then we scaled it up and keep learning. And now we're getting an opportunity to go look at this show, and we get to look at it and say what's working and what's the way forward. I don't know quite what it is yet, but there's a way forward here.
Bigger prints need bigger galleries, too.
Yeah, okay, I want to make some small ones. It's time. We've made some small ones, so yeah.
Maybe tagging off of this question of people wanting to sort of have stances and sort of immediately consumable positions. This series, the War for the Union work, which is again sort of about the size of the doom scrolling pieces in here, and they're combinations of woodcut with silkscreen. They present images of conflict, but they're sort of built out of a conflict of images that flash cut things together. Let me see if I can find the one I'm talking about here. But women's rights activists and anti-abortion crowds, Zionist students and pro-Palestinian students, Democrats and Republicans using the same language of fighting. There's one back here. Yeah, here we go. Fight, fight, fight. They layer with another register of conflict images, which are contemporary or contemporaneous illustrations from Harper's Weekly of the Civil War. And there's, you'll see sometimes they just appear as texture, and then they sort of pop out like this figure of liberty with the sword here that kind of comes out of this crowd. These compositions are not about a kind of good points on both sides, 10,000-foot objective view of the national nightmare. But they are engaged with these questions of or they're not engaged with, this is propagandizing the audience or giving some sort of moral instruction, and they're not particularly interested in documenting something. What are they reaching for in terms of that sort of conflict of images built out of images of conflict?
It's a good question.
It's,
that's why we ask Lane to do this, because
yeah.
he asks good questions.
Well, for doom scrolling, I was often thinking about the Sergei Eisenstadt, who Battleship Potemkin director, wrote this essay called "Montage as Conflict," and you can have conflicts of scale, conflicts of color, and I think we're more interested in depicting the conflict and how disorienting it is, rather than telling someone how to think or feel, because they already have their opinion, and we have ours. Yeah, it's messy.
It's messy. Yeah, I mean, a collage is something that's a collage tries to make like a singular worldview, or like looking out the window and everything kind of makes sense. A montage is more like images in conflict, things that don't necessarily fit together, and they give room for things to exist together on the same page that might not necessarily fit together. They give room for people with different points of view to actually access it and can look at it. They give room for things to unfold slowly over time. We have political position. I mean, if you've been listening to me, I definitely have a political position, but it's not my position that, or I think I can speak for Zorawar here too. It's not our position to make propaganda. Propaganda is like, what it is already, and then you consume it, and that's it. Like, we're trying to open up a space where there can be a more careful consideration of it, and longer viewing, and it's not like just like this dumb, put both sides together and treat them equally. We're not interested in that either. But I mean, this is a language, the language of contemporary politics. If you're following the election, both sides are saying fight. They're saying the exact same thing. So, and we're pointing that out in this one. There was one that's the balloon view over Washington. This is both sides too of it. But you can depack it. The one I'm thinking about is the red, white, and blue one with the debate that was just going on. It's a different kind of, this one. So this is the politics of aesthetics, the politicization of aesthetics, or the aestheticization of politics. You flip them around. Both sides, like if you look at the debates, the RNC and the DNC debates and the conferences, they both use the language of patriotism. Like visually, this is what it looks like, and this is both sides using it. So this is a visual depiction, and it actually flips and turns on its head and turns upside down. It's aestheticized politics. The other one was like poking at the language that repeats itself. So it is, I don't know if it's both sides in there.
And when for the viewer, when you're presented with this kind of mess, you start to interpret it and start to you have to make some sense of it, and that kind of unpacking is what we want to encourage someone to do when they're standing in front of it. These are events that we all witnessed, and you can easily just kind of ignore them, but to revisit them and unpack them in your mind of what's going on, what has happened, is an important thing to do.
And it's not just conceptual, like what we're talking about. Some of this stuff is formal language. Like we're mixing Civil War engravings with these, so the tents pop through. But the balloons in that one are cannonballs from like engravings from the Civil War, and then there's a huge cannon in it. And then the eagle is like in the Constitution forever. This is something that's like patriotic in language, and they fit together formally. This round shape fits with this round shape, and this fits with this round shape. So they give the formal and the conceptual kind of can work together a little bit there. I don't know. I could decode it. Do we want to decode this one? No. You guys can go see the show and figure this one out.
I mean, I do think it could be there's some fun decoding to do in in some of these.
In all of them, yeah. There's
I
some.
mean, I kind of wanted to flip back to the blue marble
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
and look at it, because I think this one in particular is, I mean, I feel like this is a little bit of one of the thesis statements in this show is this guy.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about it, Zorawar?
Yeah, sure. It's a combination of the famous blue marble photograph with a projection of what the coastlines would look like if all the ice on Earth melted. So you can see that Florida's gone and that the Great Lakes are kind of where North America begins. The Amazon basin is flooded. There's gigantic hurricanes the size of the ocean. It's also combined with the kind of language of historical map making.
Yeah, the lines, the topographical
Yep.
lines. It's called Blue Marble 2312, which is a speculative near future that follows Kim Stanley Robinson. If people read speculative future sci-fi, near sci-fi stuff, who talks about near future terraforming and getting out of the climate crisis. Ministry for the Future is a more recent one that he wrote that I think actually provides models forward. So it follows the topographic maps and the lines, and at first you look at it's a great image, but like once you start this, it gives you a chance to sort of slowly unfold that it is like the climate crisis. And where's Florida? Oh boy, New York, where did it go? Amazon is ocean water. Oh, that's a little nuts, right? So it also like was for us like we do things for this conceptual reason, but we also like have fun with making the images. Space is just every color piled on top of each other. That's it, and then it's the wood grain, and it makes like kind of like nebulas or like seeing distance.
Yeah, I feel like another thing that I noticed in the gallery when people sort of approach these, there's often a question of which flood was this, or which memorial is this, or what day in New York was that. And you guys are approaching these things that sort of have a certain documentary feel, but it's the documentation of something that seems to always be happening. And there's a little bit of it, and some of this has to do with this idea of speculation and the near future, but that you guys are establishing a little bit of a different contract with the reality of the image. And I wonder if that's something that you guys want to talk about a little bit, about how they seem very familiar, but are they, where are they on that scale of sort of documentation, imagination, recombination?
Right, a forest fire feels familiar because the forest is on fire every summer. And these also take a long time to make. Our forest fire piece took 2 years, and the forest would reliably be on fire. Gun violence is not something that happens in just one incident. It's a recurring problem. You can expect it to happen again. That piece of the Ukrainian funeral is based off of images of many Ukrainian funerals. That's kind of the point, that there's so much of it, that we're inundated with these images of these categories of events.
The works on the wall here called doom scrolling were looking at the way we were consuming media and images between May 24th, 2020 during the pandemic, and then through January 6th, 2021. And we were really looking at like singular events. We were confusing them by like the montage technique. But once we came out of that, had a discussion about like how do we look at images now, and what do we see, and like how are we consuming images. And we were just noting that it was on this more general, broader, larger, like things repeating themselves, not exactly to repeat themselves the same, but like they were different somehow too. But we were looking at larger things. It felt like, oh, this is like a funeral, and it's in Christian mythologies, but it's in other mythologies. Photojournalists, when they go and they document the war, like they'll take things that look like a Kathy Kollwitz print after Karl Liebknecht got assassinated, or they'll take a photo that looks like a crucifixion or something like that. And we just noticed all these things kind of coming together, and we built these images with that in mind to bring the historic into it, bring the present into it, and to make the statement, the moment, much longer than just the singular, this is happening.
Right. Like the fly landed on Mike Pence's head just once. If you go back to the War for the Union ones, there's a familiarity in these events in that we're looking back to the Civil War, the clashing of two opposite sides and the kind of bodies against each other. It's different because we're looking at the immediate election cycle, has us back to having a kind of anxiety with the news that we weren't feeling prior to last year, except for in 2020, of course. So there's a bit of that, like this is the student protests on the Columbia campus and other campuses.
Other campuses too, right? Yeah. And there's like a soldier.
Yeah, there's a soldier.
From a Winslow Homer. This is the imagery, the photographic imagery comes out of the Charlottesville Unite the Right rallies in 2017. But it's made out of the bayonet charge or cavalry charge.
Right. So like that figure on the upper left there with the mustache and the beard, there's a strange parallel between what a contemporary person in Charlottesville might look like and what that guy from the Winslow Homer engraving looked like.
And it's Antifa on the right, and this one is also employing like this like kind of swirling, like Rubens kind of like bodies, like kind of like coming together, like painting that we often look at too. There were some ones of the etchings that I didn't even realize that they were in here.
They're in here. Actually, I think that's a great place to go next, because they're this sort of interesting little bridge between the big sort of romantic landscape woodcuts and the super frenetic War for the Union prints. But these multicolor, multiplate etchings all have kind of two. Sorry, let me find my notes here. So they each have, as their component pieces, there's a flower or a plant that's native to a specific region. They all sort of take their title from the name of the plant, like this is a Japanese lily, this is a poinsettia, I can't pronounce that.
Yeah, we have the same problem with that one.
And they include images of environmental and sort of social justice protests taking place within the biological range of that plant. They're also, I think they're quieter. They sort of remind me of mourning cards, but they also have that sort of historical printmaking reference to botanical catalogs and botanical illustration. They also, if you guys want to go into the technical stuff, these have been moved via offset lithography from sort of a digital realm of composition eventually into copper plates. And I guess I wonder in a sort of general sense how these a little bit more intimate scale, a little bit more calm feeling pieces, how those are working in this sort of bigger project that this show puts together.
Well, for one, they're a way to zoom in to be globally specific. In the case of saffron, saffron doesn't follow national borders. It grows from Spain all the way to India. So you see signs in Greek, Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, English, Spanish. But the message for these protesters is the same. It's similar to a view of the entire globe, but it allows us to kind of look from region to region. And like the one of the Pacific Islands that we can't pronounce, that one is a very specific issue of rising water levels, which will erase these nations whose flags are depicted in there.
They're going to be gone. botanical illustrations are like, in the history of print is really rich, and botanical illustrations are one of them. They're also tied to colonialism, and science and knowledge is tied to like power and subjugation. So we thought it was a chance to revisit that a little bit and to try to sort of cast a wider net and to look at the world from the point of view of not just like the Eurocentric. Most of the botanical illustrations are just like from the Alps or like Europe, and so we had to really kind of look around to find plants that were representative of the globe, and they're usually historically used for colonial administrations and colonial powers to sort of just document their colonies.
Right, so to depict local people expressing themselves because we can't speak for them, we shouldn't be speaking for them. In other series, we might be speaking as Americans about American politics, but not in this case.
Yeah. It's a way of pointing out the issues. And they do it. We thought it was important. We had these like massive woodcuts. When you guys go see the show, you're like, holy shit, look at those woodcuts. And then we had these more frenetic War for the Union. We just wanted to make something that was a calmer place, a smaller, you could get closer to, and that would be a bridge. These are a bridge. The War for the Union are protests and politics and culture wars. Most of the large-scale woodcuts are romantic landscape, Anthropocene. These are in the middle. These are the bridge between the two series, and we thought it was important to try to make it all gel a little bit more. And it's for us. It's also everything in the show is heavily researched, art historically, but also in the contemporary image. It's a way for us to be like, honest and actually go around and do our homework and say, okay, what's the issue in South America, in this country? What's the flower and what's actually going on there? And to pull it together and, begin to sort of think about it and present it as, it's a problem we all have, but it is, the old adage, like, think globally, act locally. I think there's a little bit of that in our impulse to make these. And they're fun. 4-color etchings, like they're great. You got to see them.
I just to close out, I wanted to ask. It's maybe a little bit of commonplace, but musicians will often say that improvisation or even ensemble playing is really is a matter of listening. And you've talked about sort of doing your due diligence in research, and there's a lot of visual history involved in this work. And so making visual art is like largely a matter of looking at the self and looking at the world. Printmaking in particular is often a question of looking how that world kind of passes through all kinds of processes and sort of comes back to us through the medium of paper. What does the process of bringing these prints to the surface tell us about how to look and how to see?
I think the slowness of the looking is important, and in that process, it's a slow process.
And the act of looking. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't really look anymore. I don't think. I think modern technologies have erased seeing all the colors that we see. CMYK, a gamut that's on your computer screen or a color gamut that's on a printed piece of paper only is like 60% of like maybe or less of the visual colors that we actually can see. So I think as humans, we're losing some of our brain cells or our neurons that actually can see the world for that. Seeing ourselves. I'm a little thrown off by the self part of that because we're collaborative, but not really. But when people have asked us like the content of it and what we're actually trying to depict, and we're depicting things that are social, essentially, that are environmental issues that affect people. And, it's politics, it's the public sphere, it's the place that you come together and actually discuss and have discourse. That's a shared world that we both have. That's a shared world that we both have and that we have with you guys in the audience and with you, Lane. So it's something that we can actually collaborate on.
Yeah, that's the ensemble playing part. So the
Yeah.
listening is like we have to listen to each other, listen to the print as we're, on layer 5, how we respond to it to make layer 6.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think we're gonna.
Was that 45 minutes?
That's,
Yep.
we're
Yep.
there. And I think we're gonna open it up to questions from the floor.
Yeah, we probably need.
Yes.
Do we have a mic if someone's going to ask?
Yeah, I'm going to
questions?
help you out and bring the mic to whoever has a question. Yeah. Who has opening up the floor? Who has some questions? Perfect.
Also, our show is open late tonight.
Yep, open
for
till
anybody.
8 o'clock tonight, 520 West 20th Street. Petzel, Petzel, between 10th and 11th in Chelsea on 25th Street.
Thanks for a really great talk, and the work is really beautiful. The work in Chelsea is pretty incredible to experience that scale as well. I
Thanks.
was curious if you might have anything to say about the way your collaboration has shifted over time, because you've done a lot of work together, and in conversation, I would imagine you know each other better, know yourselves better, maybe have had different points of shifts that have been important, but because collaboration is such a key part of making prints, I'm curious what your experience together has been like that way.
That's a good question. When we made these, every decision was made together. How big is the fly? What's the angle of the fly? I just say that because I'm looking at the fly. But, all of it was,
Yeah.
we're looking at one screen, sitting next to each other. Now we've got 2 computers. So there's a little bit of, and we have an understanding of how we're working. So there's a bit more independence within the collaboration, even though everything is still agreed upon.
And we make sure that it's evolved to the point that, we've had images that one person gets ahead of it and starts to do a little bit more work without talking about it or explaining or thinking about it, and then we'll just abandon it. We're like, it doesn't work. It's gone too far. It's got too much of one person's stamp on it. So,
Although some of these, you can,
you
can recognize the difference kind of in kind of concentration of Rob versus me on some of these.
Yeah.
But it's not 100%.
No, every one of them has both, but it is true. We've started. I sort of know what Zorawar is going to say in advance, and I'll sort of get ahead of it a little bit and actually do that.
Oh, that's good.
I think. I don't know if you do. I'm like, okay, and then probably the other way around.
You'll think, oh, Rob wants to put leaf green on this. God, I hate leaf green. It's
I
my
know.
least favorite green. What are we gonna do? And then, but we'll talk it out. It's not like you'll just kind of
It's a
just do
conversation
it anyway.
we can talk about. We can keep talking about green. Look at Lane is wearing green.
It's a better green than leaf green.
That's right.
You gotta have some red in your green.
It's a little colder.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah, leave
It's
it
got
alone.
red in it. But we'll see where it goes next. We'll see where it goes next. When we always, we come up with a sort of general plan of a series. We think in series. Thinking in a cycle. It's a printmaking way to think, like Katie Kowitz's like the Peasant Revolts, or Otto Dix's like the World War I series.
Right, or Jacques Caillot, Goya,
Yeah. Warhol's.
yeah, Death and Disasters.
So we think in series, and once we kind of identify like a broad theme, we'll start collecting images. We'll put them all together with what we call a stack, which has the historic stuff in it. We'll start to make color palettes, and all that stuff is discussed. And once we start to sort of, okay, we need to do something about the refugee crisis, or we need to do something about RNC, DNC, we need to do something about the border wall. We need to, we'll have our list of what we kind of want to do, and then one of us will maybe put together a fast composition. It could be either of us, and then we'll pass it to the other person and say, okay, you know, and then we'll go back and forth, and then, you know, we'll be like, you know, take a look at what I'm working on here, or what do you think? And he'd be like, oh, that figure's, you know, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, but there is a little more, slightly more independence, and especially more in the War for the Union than there is in the history is present. Yeah. It's so much a task to make a woodcut in 7 or 8 layers at that scale that's all of that stuff is shared. One person can't get ahead of that one. For the smaller stuff, it's possible to have one person get a little bit ahead of it. But all the processes, I mean, I feel like I'm talking too long about this, but all the processes the machine, the assemblage that we put this stuff through has all been developed between the two of us. Long-term conversations about how to think about building an image, long-term conversations about how to break it into color layers, long-term conversations about the technical stuff to do it. All the systems are all built mutually. The systems are all built mutually. And they influence what's going to come out of it. So even if I took one of these systems that we've developed and done something that would be theoretically my own, like I'm the one who did all the drawing, it would still be, Zorawar would still be in there at this moment in the way that I've been working. I did a piece in North Carolina on a residency, and like, Zorawar wasn't even there, and I was like, oh, stop telling me.
It's the wrong green.
The wrong green, and he was right.
Some of the longest conversations we've had are just about the proportions of the rectangle that it's going to be. And
yeah.
But then we stick with it, and then that's, you know,
and then
the collaboration's already in the system. Yeah.
We build a system. So, yeah. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, great question.
So when you first started, who was better at the wood blocks and who was better at the silk screening? And had you interchanged your skills together doing this?
Also a good question.
All of it the same? So when you first started, who did the blocks first? Or did you work on them together? And then who did the silk screen?
You want to start that question?
Yeah,
you
sure.
can start that question.
The plan for the collaboration was an exchange of ideas. That I've used Illustrator more, Rob has been on Press more, and that we're gonna teach each other. And I don't know if that actually ever happened.
You still do more Illustrator than me. I'm like,
yeah, but that's fine. It's because we both just kind of stayed working on it. So I have a little more of the digital side. Rob's got a little more on press experience, but we both do it. It's not like, 100%.
Yeah, their first collaboration that no one's ever seen, and if maybe no one ever will because it's not that good. We spent 2.5 years just on one print, and it was about, we had met in a gallery that we had both shown at in Philly some years ago, and then we met again at a friend's opening, and we were talking about activating some of the digital technologies through the old medium. And, Zorawar had ideas about it and had a certain skill set. I had ideas about it and a certain skill set. A lot of our skills, we have a lot of, complementary. We have a lot of things that we both have done, but so there's an overlap. But there is a skill set that's Zorawar is a little better at tracing down vectors. I could do it, but it's painful. I'm a little better at wiring the CNC machine when things go wrong, stuff like that. So we do have. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, and there's enough to do that you need two people to do it anyway. So there are things that are kind of more Rob tasks and that are more Zorawar tasks.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question.
Right here.
I'll reach, it's okay.
I kind of have a question about how you go about pricing these, since it's such a big team that you're working with. Also, it seems like there's a lot of time and effort going into singular prints. And also, when you're working on one print, are you also working on other prints at the same time? Kind of what does the timeline look like for a gallery show, maybe, and things like that.
There's like 7 questions
Yeah.
there.
Well, the pricing thing, we just let the gallery do that. And then we think, oh, maybe that's low, maybe that's high, but I don't know. Whatever.
They have experience
I'd like to
doing
not
it.
think about that. The timeline with a show, you can have a show on the books, you can lose a show, the show can get bumped, you can get dropped, whatever, but we still just showed up to the studio every day that we could and just kept making prints. I think that's like
Yeah.
the most important part of the timeline. Whether you have a deadline, which does affect how many pieces you're going to have, how big are the pieces, or you can kind of make the pieces first to try to get the big gallery. You need those prints to convince them to give that to you. But either way, you've got to show up to the studio and just keep making something.
I mean, I've went from years working at like nonprofit or public art, this, and now I've evolved into a we don't profit model, which is expensive to do this stuff. But I mean, we have studio assistants, and we look at it as like, we're working for free. What are we going to get the money? Or, what's happened with the last project? Put it all into the next project, all in, roll the dice, cross your fingers. Hopefully it's going to work. But yeah, it's about going to the studio every day. We started this project, this large project. We had a show in Buffalo at a university gallery that gave us, we were like, okay, they got walls big enough to do this, but they weren't going to sell any of them. The gallery that you'll see when you go see the show, Petzel, we had the first show with them at their Uptown Gallery, which is a little more project space. And we were like, okay, we're ready, we're going to do the second show. And they were like, oh, hold on, you got to show us the work first. So we had to make the work in order to get the second show. And you could ask us about this after. I don't want to get too much, but the commercial gallery does have a way that they price things, and we're trying to figure out what it is. It's not exactly clear to us the way that works. I can't even begin to explain it. It's like it's a formula that as an artist you're like, oh, that's how you. Oh, really? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but if this project can fund the next project, that's enough for me. That's enough I think. Is that enough?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Prior to these, most of the time you lose money on your show. That's been our experience prior to doom scrolling.
I spent years. You take a piece of paper that is clean and still maybe has a resale value, and you take a can of ink that's never been opened, you might be able to sell it. And then you get the paper dirty and open the can of ink, and it's worth $0.
I don't know if we can still say that. These are priced more than the
But
paper was priced.
as a young artist, that's
Yeah.
what's going to happen. Sorry, that's part of the deal.
Yeah, but then you still have to go to the studio.
Yeah, it's just the war of
do it
attrition.
again.
Just keep going.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great, thank you all so much. Just want to do a few quick plugs. Well, first, yes, thank you to you all for hosting this talk for our community.
Thanks for coming.
Zorawar, Rob, and Lane will be hanging around for a few minutes after, so if you all want to ask them any additional questions about any of the works, reminder to check out the wood blocks up at the front, and also check out Shoestring Press up in the Grand Hall. It is in the middle aisle, right? Yeah. Middle aisle all the way to the back. So make sure you check them out. They still have maybe a print fair bingo that has apparently some cool prizes from Bushwick Print Lab. And also, yeah, make sure you check out the Petzel Gallery before April 12th. Cool. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.